Lesson number 7, Haircut. When he was a little boy, people who met him for the first time marveled at his name. It was a long name and a bit of a tongue twister. When he started school, his teachers preferred to put him down in the class register as DNP. All his friends called him DNP. His mother, who had been responsible for giving him the name in the first place, shortened it even further and addressed him as DN. And his sister, not to be outdone, called him D. Now that he was older and wiser, DNP or DN or D always introduced himself to others by his full name, Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada. He also thought that people would think more highly of him if he grew a fine beard. So he did, and it was a very fine beard indeed. It was a marvelous beard. As the years went by, Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada's smart, impressive beard turned very grey. It was a magnificent sight, but when he started to grow his hair long, he began to look a little like a tramp. One hot day, he was walking down the road to the market to buy some vegetables for his lunch. He suddenly felt a little weary. Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada took off his cap and wiped his head with his handkerchief before replacing it carefully on his head. The cap used to fit perfectly well until he started to grow his hair long. Fortunately for Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada, he was passing by a park at this time and spotted an empty bench beside the outer fence of the park. So he sat down to rest for a few minutes. As he sat in the scorching sun, wondering how he was going to carry those vegetables home, Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada decided to close his eyes for a moment or two. In precisely 30 seconds, he had dozed off. His head dropped forward till his bearded chin rested on his chest and his cap fell into his lap. Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada snored. Half an hour later, a barking dog woke him from his nap. He sat upright with a jolt. It took him a few seconds to remember where he was, where he had come from, and where he was going. And then he noticed his cap in his lap. Much to his amazement, Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada's cap had a few coins in it. Where did these come from? He asked himself, looking bemused. As he sat examining the coins, a passerby stopped and added another coin to his collection. Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada was greatly shocked. My goodness, he exclaimed. People are giving me money because they think I am a tramp. He hastily removed the coins from the cap, placed it on his head, stood up, and brushed his jacket. Yes, it's all looking a little crumpled, he thought to himself. And perhaps it's time for a new look, Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada. I am going to reinvent you. When this decision made, Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada moved along toward the market with the great speed. At the market, he did not go to the vegetable stalls. He marched straight to a semi-style salon. thought Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada as he entered the salon and looked around the place. Can't spell, but I hope they can cut here. There were 5 chairs in front of 5 long mirrors on the facing wall. 4 of the chairs were taken, and the 4 gentlemen occupying these chairs were having their hair cut. The room felt like an oven, but Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada was determined to stay. The owner was a large man with at least 3 chins. There was not a single hair on his head. He greeted Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada with a bow. "Hello," said the owner, nodding his shiny head from side to side. "Haircut, trim, shampoo, washing, beard, all?" Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada wondered if the man knew any 2-word sentence. As he thought about this, he looked at himself in one of the long mirrors on the wall. It was not a pretty sight. "Yes," replied Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada. "Washing, shampoo, no. Hair, cutting, trim, beard, yes." "Sitting, please," said the man, pointing to an empty chair. "Ah," said Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada to himself as he sat down. "2 words, incorrect grammar, but 2 words in one sentence. I hope he can do better with my hair." Mr. Sammy, the owner of Sammy Style Salon, wrapped a sheet round the neck of the Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada. The sheet covered his chest and arms and reached almost to the floor. It was a little grubby, but Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada did not mind. He had made up his mind. Mr. Sami introduced one of the assistant barber. The young assistant scurried forward, carrying a comb in one hand and clicking a sharp pair of scissors in the other. He smiled as he approached and nodded his head from side to side, just like his boss. Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada did not say a word. He stared at his reflection in the mirror while the barber clicked away at the top of his head. Beads of the sweat began to drip from Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada's nose. He had been hot outside the salon. He was hotter inside this oven-like room. And to make matters worse, Mr. Sami had tucked him up in a blanket. Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada began to nod, not like Mr. Sami or his assistant had done, but a sleepy nod. Every time his chin fell forward into his chest, the barber yanked it upright. But this did not worry Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada. He was too hot and tried to bother. He soon fell soundly asleep. Soundly is the right word for this kind of sleep because Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada made an awful sound. He snored loudly. Half an hour later, Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada's eyes opened sleepily. He yawned and stretched and then remembered where he was. He looked at himself in the mirror. He stared. He blinked. He stared again. The reflection in the mirror was not one he recognized. It was not Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada, but some other man. He raised one arm and winked, just to make sure that the man in the mirror was himself. Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada leaped out of his chair and screamed. He pointed at the man in the mirror and then turned to face Mr. Sami, who was hurrying toward him. "What have you done?" cried Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada. Where is it? I asked you to trim my beard, not shave it off. Beard shaving, replied Mr. Sami, using a rare two-word sentence again and nodding his head from side to side. Okay. There is nothing okay about it, cried Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada, stroking his smooth chin. A long argument followed. Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada insisted on paying less because Mr. Sami had not followed his instructions. He complained that he had come into the salon as Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada and was leaving as somebody else. Mr. Sami wanted more money because far more hair had been removed from the customer's head. Finally, after a long debate, a very unhappy Mr. Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada left the salon. He forgot all about his vegetables and headed towards the bus stand. He mumbled, grumbled, and cursed all the way there. Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada joined a queue and waited for his bus. Then an old lady, who was also waiting for the bus, turned to him and spoke. Young man, said the old lady pleasantly, I left my watch at home. Would you kindly tell me the time? Certainly, certainly, said Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada with a smile. It's a time to celebrate. The old lady gave Danish Nasiruddin Pirzada a very odd look, but he did not care. Young man, he repeated to himself as he left the queue and trotted home, still smiling.